The Sex.com Chronicles, Chapter 1, Pizza in Ojai. When I first met Gary Kremen, it was a beautiful day. I had been delighted to receive a phone call from my old friend Robin Coffer, with whom I graduated from UCLA Law School in 1986. Since then, she'd earned an advanced degree in tax law and become an IRS lawyer. Not exactly what I expected from our days at UCLA, riding motorcycles, worshipping the Ramones, and holding poetry readings in the law school courtyard. But she still got her kinks. Robin said she was coming through town with a friend on the way to a party in Santa Monica, and since her friends were usually smart and made good conversation, I was anticipating their arrival. It was the summer of 1999. I was living with my wife and two of our three kids, Joshua and Anna, in a two-bedroom apartment in Carpinteria, California, a beachside community a few miles south of Santa Barbara. We had recently arrived after 6 years in Oregon, and I was looking to set up a criminal defense practice in Ventura County. Local legal gossip told me the prosecutor was overzealous, filed lots of cases, and was doing everything possible to help defense attorneys earn a living. Sounded good to me. I opened an office in Ojai, a little town about 20 miles inland from Carpinteria, and a nice motorcycle ride from our apartment. The office was tiny, but had high-speed internet and a Ventura County phone number, so I figured I was ready for business. I was recontacting old ballet buddies to see what I could stir up, working on a couple of Oregon cases, and living on savings while things picked up. My son was working at Starbucks, my wife was working as a legal secretary, and my daughter was working as a page at the Santa Barbara Library. I was doing laid-back things like meeting my wife for lunch with homemade sandwiches, picking up my daughter after work, and occasionally doing research on the Oregon cases. I did my research in the old library at the Santa Barbara courthouse. Outside the courthouse, a plaque commemorates the arrival in 1776 of Francisco de Anza, the Spanish explorer who pioneered the overland route from Sonora to Spain's coastal settlements. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw the plaque because, while de Anza is a noted historical figure of the American Southwest, since childhood I'd thought of him as the man in the portrait on my Aunt Pearl's living room wall, with a big feather in his military hat. My aunt commissioned the picture because he is a direct ancestor on my mother's side. My mother and aunt were named Ainsa. De Anza married into the Ainsa family as the fortuitous result of his search for relatives of the same name. The Santa Barbara courthouse is a jewel, a large two-story building with white stucco walls and clay-tiled hallways. Broad spiral staircases at the corners of the building open onto the lawns of an expansive courtyard where weddings are often held. In courtrooms, immense murals record the progress of the California settlers, beginning with the gold-helmeted Spaniards wading ashore from their vessels anchored in the bay. In the large courtrooms, the air is scented with leather and fresh sea air, which circulates freely through the building. I sometimes sat looking at the bold figures of conquistadors in leather armor, bearing muskets and crosses, planting vines and mining gold, and felt the thought stirring. What lands might I conquer? Robin called from her cell phone on a Saturday morning, and I spun down to the parking lot in downtown Carpinteria to meet her and the mystery friend. The first thing I noticed was the car. It wasn't Robin's car. She wouldn't drive something like that. Her style was more the classic tangerine Porsche 914 she'd babied for years. This car was an old, beat-up Honda, with bodywork that looked like it had been done in the parking lot at the beach by a guy with a bucket, a can of Bondo, and a pack of sandpaper. The stereo had been ripped out, leaving a couple of wires protruding. The interior was the essence of grungy, and the owner was Gary Kremen. Impish is the only word to describe him in those days. His constant mannerisms were emitting outrageous remarks, punctuated by a playfully malevolent smile and questioning eyes. His grinning face, shining with mischievous glee, surmounted a nebbishy bulk that he nevertheless whisked about with considerable energy. I found it impossible not to like him. Since it really wouldn't be out of the way, we agreed to take a day trip to Ojai so they could see my office. Tiny as it was, I was proud of it, and mention of the high-speed internet connection piqued Gary's interest. It's a nice drive from Carpinteria to Ojai. You leave the fog behind, rising into the hills to the mirrored expanse of Lake Casitas, a large drinking water reservoir in which swimming is not allowed, but boating is. Then you descend into the warm Ojai Valley, which sports such attractions as wall-to-wall orange groves, a few nice restaurants, cheap office space, a New Age community, and a famously pink sunset. We had lunch together, my wife Tara, my daughter Anna, Robin, Gary, and I. Between bites of Hawaiian-style pizza, Gary spoke the fateful words. I was the first person to register Sex.com. He had been first to register it, he said, but a convicted thief by the name of Stephen Michael Cohen had stolen it using a forged letter. Cohen, Gary said, had done 46 months in federal prison for fraud and other crimes, and had stolen the name shortly after his release in 1995. The story sounded screwy, but I make it a policy not to say that to a prospective client. Gary said he was disappointed with his lawyers because they weren't doing any good job. He was particularly annoyed that they weren't interested in playing up Cohen's criminal past, which seemed to him like a trump card. He hadn't chosen his own lawyers because the litigation was being financed by other people, but now he had money and wanted control of the strategy. He wanted lawyers who would listen to him, and most importantly, win the case. The wheels started turning instantly in my mind. This was 1999, and the dot-com skyrocket was gaining altitude. I was excited about the legal issues. Back in 1995, my Ashland office landlord, Lance Pugh, had put a bug in my ear about the internet. Lance was a red-headed, fast-talking, forward-thinking, big-idea kind of person. He was one of my first business clients as a sole practitioner. Indeed, I paid Lance with half my rent in legal services. So he would routinely barge into my office, waving a copy of the Wall Street Journal, and start holding forth about how the internet was going to change everyone's business life, and I needed to get on the bandwagon now. Sounded like a great idea, but finding internet clients in Southern Oregon wasn't easy. Now, here I was, talking to a real Bay Area dot-commer. Gary was sitting there across from me at the table, grinning. Was he setting the hook, or was I? I looked him dead in the eye and said, "This is the case I've been waiting for." I didn't know how right I was.